Hey guys, it's your favorite sisters with the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast. On the show, you'll hear caregivers confessing the good, the bad, and the completely unexpected. You're guaranteed to relate, be inspired, lead with helpful tips and resources, and of course, laugh. Now, let's get to today's confession. Well, good morning, Jay.
Good morning, Natalie.
So we always start with good morning. I wonder why we do that.
I don't know. We could say good evening, but it would be a lie.
Yeah, that's right, because we record in the mornings, and that's the most fun. It's when we're the most frisky.
I know. We would be like sleepy in the afternoons.
That's true. We would be in a carbohydrate haze. But you know what? Less about our carbs and sleepiness and more about the amazing guest that we have today. We have another friend. Everybody's my friend, Jay.
I know that makes me nervous. You make friends everywhere. I mean, Mom was always worried that someone would steal you because you never met a stranger.
They would give me back.
That might have been a blessing. Yeah, if they stole you.
Again, let's get enough about us. I want you to tell our friends out in the big world about Jennifer, who is amazing, and her story is so good.
It is fantastic. So today we have Jennifer O'Brien with us today. Now, Jennifer spent over 35 years in the healthcare industry. In 2020, she published what has become a multi-award-winning book of the art journal she kept during her late husband Bob's 22-month illness, entitled The Hospice Doctor's Widow, a Journal. I cannot wait to talk about this book, Jennifer. So I know it's going to take a little while, but we're going to talk about it for sure. You see, Bob, this is what's so interesting to me. Bob was a palliative care and hospice physician. Precious time, and that's the end of life period when death is in sight, which he described to his patients and their families, was now his and Jennifer's to navigate in their own lives. Now, Jennifer shares her story, wisdom, and experience to help others understand the role of family caregivers and the importance of end-of-life preparations. Jennifer, I'm so happy you're here. And I just want to, if you're on YouTube watching, first of all, you can see I have all these little, you can't really see.
Put it in front of your face.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
So here's the book, because I'm so bad, but I have all my stickies in here because I have stickies everywhere, Jennifer.
You did homework.
Well, I always do my homework, Natalie, but it's absolutely beautiful, first of all. So thank you for sharing in the journal everything. And I know that what you share with us today will, if you're listening, just take a seat and get a coffee, get something to drink. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me and for that beautiful introduction.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, you have to love on your honorary sister. So, and when they're wonderful, you have to share it. So I love it. So I think, we have so much to unpack today. So little time, Jay. I can already feel it.
Let's get started.
Let's do it. So Jennifer, tell us kind of, I always like to start this way. I'm like, you were born and then fast forward, but tell us your all story, the little bit of the background and kind of working our way up to the diagnosis.
Yeah, I think that's important because I was born. And then
you were born.
About 5 years after I was born, my only sibling, David, was born. So he was 5 years younger. And the reason that that's important is because when I was 18 and he was 13, he was in a motor vehicle accident and died 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
Was extubated 3 weeks later. And not quite so there's that, right? There's what that does to a family, and not quite, and what that did to me. He was my person, my only sibling. And then not quite 20 years later, my mother got pancreatic cancer, and she died 5 weeks following her diagnosis. And wow. With pancreatic cancer, honestly, you don't really want it to go that much longer than that. Right. And I was her caregiver. And then at some point I was in healthcare, mostly on the business, leadership side, not clinical. And I had come down to Little Rock, Arkansas from Chicago to do an interim CEO position for a large orthopedic surgery practice. And that was, I do this interim leadership with some frequency. And I was a couple years into it when I met Bob Lemberg at an art gallery. And I mean, I was smitten almost instantly. He was cute and he was funny and he was sweet and he was smart. But what was also perhaps the bigger deal was that he was a hospice and palliative care physician. And I knew from my experience with my family just how important that work is with families. And so, you know, I was taken. That was a big part of what I fell in love with. We fell in love quickly. We got married. He was on faculty at our med center here in Little Rock, Arkansas. I finished up the orthopedic job and kind of went back to some of the education and consulting that I do for physicians. When he found a couple of lumps in the left side of his neck, and after some diagnostics, it was determined to be a stage 4 metastatic renal clear cell carcinoma.
So let me stop for a sec. Let me go back for a sec, because you're like, well, I do interim CEO jobs. So, you know, you had there's the loss of your younger brother at 18. And that feels like that was very quick, because you were probably a lot of the hospital piece of it going back and forth, because you said it was about 3 weeks that after his accident kind of deal.
Yeah. He never gained consciousness. Yeah.
Right. And so you go to college, you start this high-end career. You end up going into a high-end. So high stress, high work. Like, I think that's something that's kind of important. So you're driven, you're not married during this time.
I did get married. I was with a wonderful man from when I was 19 till I was 30.
Oh, I believe everybody should have a starter, Jennifer. So it's fine. Me too.
He was a good guy. It just, we were very, very young when we got together, and you know.
Yeah, no. It's totally fine. This is like, I don't care. I'm like, but you know what I mean? Everybody has a starter. And so great for him. You're on this career path, and you're working a lot. That's one of the things, you know, I know that you had mentioned to me in the past. And so then, of course, you meet Bob. So you meet Bob, and you're a little bit older, if you don't mind me saying. I mean, yeah. And
it was not children. The first for either of us.
Oh, that's what makes it feel so good. Yeah. And so, but you didn't have children though?
No, neither of us had children.
There you go. So I think that's important, because as we think about caregivers, and as we think about our own aging, as we have things that come in and out, it's like, who will take care of us? JJ and I we're solo agers, in the sense of, we don't have children. And solo agent has many definitions we talked about, but truly, so you and Bob are there, and then he gets diagnosed. How long had you guys been married before he got diagnosed? Pressure, ton of questions.
Yeah, no kidding. Math. It's math.
I love math.
You know, I think we'd been married for 3 years at that point. We were together for a total of 5 years by the time he died. Yeah.
Okay. So that makes sense. Sherry, I'll share the mic.
Okay. Thank you, Natalie. So I guess my question is, you guys have really, you've been together. So I love that you guys, you're like, okay, we fell in love, we're done. You're kind of like me, where I'm like, I'm at the age now, I'm mature, I know exactly what I want, Jennifer. I love that.
Right.
But you guys you're experienced life. So this is, although he's in that field and he has a passion for that, obviously, because that is a special heart in my mind. You guys are living your life. This is it's very obviously unexpected, because you guys are planning, you got your life together. You are each other's person. Is that?
Absolutely. No. We were super close. Just for frame of reference, he was 18 years older than I, but you're absolutely right. Very much. It was the two of us. He was very introverted. I'm sort of an ambivert, kind of on the line. So we spent all of our unscheduled time alone together. Every night we ate at this little table in our kitchen. I mean, it was absolutely perfect for us. And, you know, having lost my only sibling when I was so young, I would sometimes say to Bob, I'm afraid something's going to happen to you, right? Which is common when you have a trauma like that when you're young. And he would say, Jen, I'm going to be fine. He said, I'm going to keep working. He loved working. He said, one day when I'm about 90, I'm going to go out to get the newspaper without my trousers on. And then you're going to know, right, that it's time for me to kind of stop working, that, my mind isn't working. I mean, he had both of his parents had lived till into their 90s.
Wow.
And yes, even though he was older, he was very youthful, and we had every intention of having a long life together. Yeah.
You were going to be on the porch in the rocking chairs, basically.
Yes.
So tell me, because you are both working, and I love that about Bob, that that was like his driving factor. Even when he's sick, he wants to work. Like that is a purpose.
All he wants. Yep.
And so tell me about the day, like what your reaction versus his, because tell me about the day.
Well, it was a night. It was nighttime. That was one of the things. Bob was a physician's physician. Before he was a palliative care and hospice physician, he had been a plastic and reconstructive surgeon for 30 plus years, and came to Little Rock in 1979 and was a worker. So he worked when he was on call. He worked sometimes when he wasn't on call. So he had really served this community, in times of trauma. He operated on people who had been in car accidents, all that sort of stuff. So when a surgeon and then physician like that in a small community starts to have some diagnostics, right? The medical community, at least in our case, really rose up. And so that's all to say that the phone call came very late into the evening. He had a biopsy of one of the bumps on the left side of his neck. He had when he went in for the visit with the otolaryngologist about his neck, he'd had some discomfort in his abdomen, and he had them, again, physicians do this sort of thing, like take that CT that is normally CTing your sinuses and point it at my belly, because I need to see what's going on in my belly. And they had seen some lesion looking things that led him to believe, let him and his otolaryngologist to believe that we were probably looking at a lymphoma, which is a serious cancer, but it's typically not a terminal cancer. It's one that you die with, not of. And so we were fully expecting that this phone call would come and the answer would be lymphoma, and we would just basically end up adjusting our lives, right, to life with serious illness. But it wasn't. This Dr. Graves Hernsberger called. It was probably 9:00 at night and said, Bob, we can't figure this. This is not lymphoma. This is very bad. And we don't know exactly what it is. And it was stunning. It was utterly stunning. We both got tears in our eyes. And just stunned that it was affecting us. I actually wrote a poem about this that is in the Journal of Narrative Medicine called Intima. And it's very much starts with the night that we learned of the diagnosis and then goes on from there. But it was devastating. It was utterly devastating. And we sort of got our shock over with. He called his sister or his brother and his sister and told them what was happening. We were very lucky also, again, serving the community as a physician. This otolaryngologist said, who do you want for oncology, for your oncologist? And Bob named the one he wanted. And that doctor called us about 10 minutes later and said, wow, what time do you want to come in tomorrow? Again, you show up for everybody over, 40 years, and then they start to show up for you when you really need it. So, we were very lucky that way and got to go in and see the oncologist right away.
Let me ask you a question because of past experiences, because we say that really impacts everything. And this impacted me. Our dad died when he was 58. And I know with my own husband, his 58th birthday was hard for me because I thought it was like he's 58. Obviously, everyone dies at 58. That's the craziest thing probably for anybody because his parents are in their 90s. When you got that diagnosis, was there a part of you that said 3 to 5 weeks? was there anything that said, okay, people that have gotten sick in your life, it's a shorter term? Was there any?
Yeah, no, that diagnosis, we were very certain that it was 90 days tops when we got that diagnosis. And honestly, it's an interesting thing that you bring that up. I hadn't even thought in those terms, but yes, I certainly do now. I find it really, when people have a cancer diagnosis almost of any sort, I find of course, I try to get one of the work I do now is trying to get people to talk about their end of life wishes, even when they're perfectly healthy,
right?
Because that's going to happen to all of us. And it's such a huge part of the lives of those that go on after they lose a loved one. But even now, I do not have a ton of experience with, certainly not with family members who get a cancer and get it cured and go on. It's almost always, in my experience, yes, someone dies of their cancer or their condition, and that is an adjustment. Yes, we thought it was going to be 90 days. We were very pleased when I think we both had experience from previous times when there were fewer drugs available. There really is almost every 6-8 weeks, there are new cancer medications being approved. And so we were both, I think our brains were stuck in an earlier time when, there was only that one sort of, oh, well, if this is what this is, then we need to just enjoy the precious time. Yeah.
Tell me about precious time, because that's the first time I'd ever heard of it when we talked to you. And tell me about it. Yeah.
So it's a term that I believe Bob coined. I mean, I had never heard it before him. And he used to come home in the evening and he would say, I told the family they were into precious time. And he would say it just like that, precious time. And I'm from Chicago. I just thought that was sort of a Southern thing, like Southern people say umbrella or insurance. And then when he would describe what he meant by that, I realized, oh, no, that's purposeful, that the emphasis is on the type of time. It is a way of telling families this doesn't go on forever and death is coming. And you need to say what you need to say and don't say what you'll later regret. This is the time for the I love yous and the I'm sorries and the thank yous and the goodbyes and the we'll be okay stuff, so that, and it's super important to have that opportunity on the occasions that we know it's coming. 4 out of 5 of us die following illness or old age. Only 1 in 4 die suddenly. And yet, because of our unwillingness to name this as precious time, it or whatever you want to call it, we actually have people who took care of somebody for years, right? The average caregiving duration is 4.9 years. That's the average. So you took care of somebody for years and they died. This happens all the time. And the caregiver, now turned griever, is shocked. Didn't take the time to say what they really wanted to say after all that, what they really needed to say. And there's no do-over, right?
Yeah.
And so this was such a gift to these families of them. And I know it was a gift because Bob would get thank you notes from families who had lost a loved one. And almost instantly then, of course, that term comes to my mind when we get the diagnosis, because I know it's a terminal diagnosis one way or another, right? No matter how long it lasts. I'm not sure Bob ever told a family you're into precious time 22 months before the death. I'm quite certain that that he told them closer to the patient's end of life. But for us, of course, it started upon diagnosis because Bob had coined the term. And I will say that term has exploded within healthcare, thank goodness, and is almost at this point larger than my book. It is there are healthcare folks that are using it all over the North America, actually. And I did, for those who are listening, who are in the healthcare field, I created a free download on my website that is called the Precious Time Implementation Guide for Healthcare Professionals. And I have to tell you, I think it's quite good. The feedback I have gotten on it from doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals, social workers, has been really, really positive, that they are thrilled to have this term, this way of telling people this very serious, very sad thing is about to happen. But it's in terms that people can relate to and can understand and find beautiful. Because it is a beautiful period of time. If we see it that way, it makes for a grief that is far less complicated. Right? That I can say what I have to say and go on after the death of my loved one, knowing we were fully reconciled, that this person knew that I loved them up until and beyond their last breath. And there are a few things more beautiful than that, I think.
I think about our grandmother who was in hospice, and I think about we have a grandmother that passed just simply of old age. She was in the hospital for a couple of weeks, but I first of all, I cheer the whole concept on. And I want to say to all physicians, get that word like coined in your head, because I wish that term, to me, that calls it out instead of someone coming and saying, well, it's getting close. She just got, the terms that they try to use softly. But I think if someone had said, you're in the precious time, I think that, to me, that actually puts chills on me, but it puts this urgency on me to say, make this right, Jennifer. And that's a gift from Bob that will go on for, that is a gift, and a gift that you shared it in your book. So I love that. There's so many gifts in the book, first of all. So we'll start there, but
and we're going to make sure we'll have the link in the show notes. I need to get that. We'll get the link in the show notes for that document, that resource, and share that, because I think that's so important.
Absolutely.
So Jennifer, so you all have, and I remember what it was like to get the diagnosis. I remember that. And as the caregiver, you're instantly in a caregiver role at that point. You shift. Jennifer is, again, her background is administrative, lots of hours, lots of working. You and Bob had been continuing to work and doing all that great stuff. And you get this diagnosis, and it's like, because, Jennifer, I know you're like me, you're a type A. So what do you immediately do in that sense? Like, so once the shock is worn over, because I get it.
Yeah.
Then what do you do? Because if you think about it, like, I know what my husband did, but then I know what I start thinking. What did you start thinking after?
Well, the first morning, so that was late at night, and we went to bed. The first morning, he got up and got ready for work, and I stayed in bed. And he came to me and said, you can't just stay in bed. And I was like, yeah, I actually can. Like, he did not want me to take to my bed, kind of thing. Yeah. I think his mother had done that quite a bit in his youth. And he, I think he knew deep down I wasn't going to do that, but I think he had, we were overwhelmed. So of course I got up, because I knew it would make him feel better about going to work if I just sat up and got out of bed and that sort of thing. But honestly, I wanted to just lie there and cry for a while. Yeah. And I think honestly, in our case, it was really both of us who got to work on, this is in the book, actually, hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And the of that is extremely important. And we did both. So often, especially with a cancer diagnosis, we get to this, we're going to fight it, right? And anything other than fighting it is a hope killer. And I simply disagree. First of all, I don't like the war metaphor. I think it is so much more than fighting. I do not consider Bob a loser because he died of cancer, right? Which which is necessary. If you're going to use that metaphor, then somebody's got to lose at some point, right? And we all die. So my husband was not a loser. And so I really love the hope and the prepare, the balance of both. And we did both. And preparation for end of life, which is what I mean by prepare, is some of the most intimate relationship you can have with a person. When you get that close to someone, to know, to listen, to ask, and to listen to what they want and what they don't want at the end of their life, and make a commitment to carry that out, regardless of what you want or don't want at the end of your life, right? We're very different. The statistics all say we're pretty split on our end of life wishes, but that you learn them enough to be able to carry them out in detail. That is a closeness that is really one of the most profound we have in our human existence, in my opinion. So we right away started doing both, getting started on treatments that were largely life extending or palliative, no cure. There were a couple weeks there that we had hopes that his cancer was going to align with one of the targeted treatments and he would get cured. But once that was determined to not be the case, we were looking at hopefully getting a little more good time together. But we did both. We prepared a lot. We ended up, we lived in a huge old house and we sold it and moved into this lovely condo that I'm in right now. We put everything in my name. We prepared so thoroughly for his death and my survivorship. And it was such a gift to me as the caregiver turned griever, and continues to this day to be a gift. There are things I do. This happened last spring. So one of the things we did was Bob worked for the VA for a long, long time, and he made an appointment. It was about 6 or 8 weeks before he died for us to go to the VA HR office and complete what is just buku paperwork for my survivor benefits. And we did that, and which is, we sat there it was a gloomy day and it was very emotional and difficult to do it, but we did it. And I get handed, this paperwork, and here's this phone number. And when Bob dies, you call this number, and they'll tell you what, basically they told me to send in his death certificate. And after we had that meeting, this always makes me so emotional. Bob handed me this little slip of paper, and it had a woman's name on it, first name only. I think it was Cindy, and a phone number. And he said, if you have any problem with the VA benefits, you call her. She will know what to do. So of course he died. And as things, in the, weeks, days after he died, I called the VA number, and I kept calling it and calling it and calling it. No one would ever answer the phone. No pickup whatsoever. So I tracked down that little piece of paper with Cindy's name on it, and I call her and I say, I'm having, Bob told me to call you if I have a problem. I call and they don't answer the phone. And she said, Jennifer, they start answering that phone at 6:40 a.m. Central Time. You call at 6:40 a.m. The next morning I called and they answered the phone. And the VA, the whole thing was taken care of. And then even 6 months ago, I was doing some clean out, you know how you do spring cleaning, organizing kind of thing. And I'm going through, and all of a sudden I realize there's a flashlight in every drawer. I didn't put those there, right? Bob put those there for me in case the power goes out. And basically all I have to do is reach to the nearest drawer and there's a flashlight there. And it's been, at that point, it had been 6 years since he died. And these gifts of preparation are still surfacing for me. And it's just like, it's like he's still telling me, I love you, Jen. It's so lovely. And I just can't encourage people to do that enough. I know caregiving is so huge. It's so, so huge. if you can balance that with, because what it is, I think, you're deep in the throes of caregiving. You can barely see an hour ahead, much less, a year or a lifetime ahead. But what it's really doing when you do the preparation, besides getting close to your person, is that it's taking care of your future self. As a caregiver. There will come a time when the person you care for dies, and your future self will need a lot that you're able to do, need the confidence that you carried out their wishes entirely, need the thorough practical preparations like Bob and I did. There are a lot of needs in that transition from caregiver to griever, and then on in survivorship. And this preparation, this balancing hope and preparation is really important for that.
Mm. Hey ladies, I need to interrupt for just a second to share about the Sisterhood membership. It's basically a sale every day, and the best part, it's free. Here's the details. We're partnering with our friends at Benefit Hub and other care partners to save you money. With over 200,000 participating companies across the U.S. and abroad, you'll find discounts at your favorite local stores, huge savings on vacations, amazing deals on home, auto, and supplemental insurances, and everything in between. Go to confessionsofthereluctantcaregiver.com to sign up, and then definitely tell your friends about it. They can join too. Trust me, there's a discount for everyone. And don't forget, it's free. Okay, back to confessing.
You said you all had, I read that you had those conversations at the dinner table long before Bob was diagnosed, that he would have those conversations. I know that, at what point do you think all of his previous experience prepared you all? Because he has a very clear state of mind of taking care of you, Jen. So, and all of that, he's coaching families and their loved one all these years, hospice and palliative, where he could have gone either way and said, I don't want to prepare. No, I'm done. I've seen this all these years. But how do you think that impacted him?
I think you're right. There probably are even palliative care and hospice doctors and nurses who, even faced with terminal illness within their own family or selves, don't do that preparation. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine Bob doing it any other way. I really can't. And when I did say in an interview that, maybe more than one interview, that we talked about death at the dinner table. We did. It happened every day in his work, right? Every day someone was dying, or several someones were dying, actively dying. It was such a big part of his work, and it was, so that we'd already done some of our own prep long before he got sick, and this was just just a thoroughness. I think part of it was that he lived for 22 months. And so as the time went on, there were even more details that we could cover. And we did. But yes, he loved me very much. And of course I loved him very much, but he did many, many things that would demonstrate that love long after his death. And so I love him even more.
So
go ahead.
I do have a question. I'm going to jump in because JJ's chatting more than me.
Sorry, I'm like
JJ,
how is that possible?
Good. It's not.
I know
it is. And everybody's going to be like, what happened to Natalie? Did she go? Did she leave? I think about, so you all are in this window of time. Did you stop working?
Yes, that's right. I did. I had finished the orthopedic job, and I had gone to a part-time consulting position with a firm that I have worked for on and off throughout my career. And yes, I said, because it was going to require travel, and I was simply not going to travel for work while my husband was ill. So yes, and we were very fortunate to be in a position that I could not work. Now, I will tell you that preparing for end of life and the rest of your life is a lot of work. So it's that much more when someone also is working a part-time or a full-time job.
Yeah, no. And I think that's fine. I think that's important to understand that even in, you talked to, there's a lot of stress associated. And if you have the ability to be able to, not only, to dedicate that time, because that's one piece you did not have to worry about as much at the forefront is the financial aspect of it. And, but again, everything that you're talking about is planning, and you're planning for your future. I love the flashlights because that's something Jason would do for me. That resonates with me so much. And I'm just like, oh, Jason would do that, or something that would be like a reminder, and I'll be like, I know, Jason, I get it.
I want to say one thing about the working and the not working. First of all, of course, caregiving is extremely hard work. So the word work, we're talking about outside the home.
Professionally. Getting paid work.
Yes, compensation. But I about a year ago, as I've said, I'm in healthcare, I'm in leadership. So I've done a lot of hiring and over the years, and one of the things you need when you're hiring is a position description, right? You need to know what this job is, what it entails before you start to embark on who you're looking for and who's a good fit. So about a year ago, I found myself thinking, what if I had to hire for the family caregiver position? And I created a position description for the family caregiver, which is also on the resources page of my website and a free download. And for all those of the folks, your folks who are listening, who are currently caregivers or have recently given up that role one way or another, I would strongly recommend downloading this caregiver position description. And I did it. I feel like what its value is several fold. One is, when healthcare workers read that position description, they are astounded. That, I've had a couple of nurses say, they can't give intramuscular injections. Oh yeah, we do. We give intramuscular injections.
We do lots of things related to medical.
Yes, we do lots of things that healthcare professionals have no idea that we've had to learn how to do. So it's very helpful. I try to get all my healthcare people to download and read it. It is also helpful for the family caregiver to have some agency, some confidence in the job that they've been doing. It is a big, full job. It would not survive a collective bargaining agreement without a massive salary attached to it. So it is a huge job, and this description demonstrates that. And then the other reason I think that's very powerful is when you do finish your caregiving one way or another, someone else takes it over or your person dies, and it's time to go back out into the professional world. Even if you've been working all the way through, this position description has language on it, I think, that will help you augment your resume in a more accurate way and give you some language to talk about what it is that has been occupying the larger part of your life for however long. So I've gotten some really great feedback from family caregivers and from professional caregivers that it is very accurate and thorough.
Yeah. It's so interesting, Jennifer, and it's so fun. I love that we go where the wind blows us. Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, and Jay, I think we should both do it. I think we should add it to our resume, because I think that caregivers are some of the best qualified individuals for so many positions because of what we're required to do. And so, again, whether you are a caregiver, have been a caregiver, will be a caregiver, or will be cared for, you want that job description. And we are absolutely going to post that, Jen, because I think it's so important. And I think
it needs its place on our resumes. And I think it's so important. It's so intentional to show employers to say, I've been a caregiver, because we don't talk about it and nobody sees that that's part of our past work experience. And I think it starts to normalize the conversation. It also informs businesses that you need to have caregiver benefits for this employee. And so I think that's something that just really hits me so much.
Well, I think about Candace Straw as someone that was one of our very beginning, one of our very first podcasts, Jennifer. And what she said was, after she cared for her mom when she had just gotten out of college, and then she had to go into that caregiving role. And so she had like just a massive amount, just this clump where she didn't work.
Year gap. It was an 8 to 10 year gap.
Yeah. And so she had that. And when she would go to find jobs, they were like, well, you have this hole in your resume. And she would try to describe what she did. And they're like, well, you didn't work. And it's like, she was also raising her 2 younger siblings.
Exactly.
And you're like, and you have your mom with cancer, and you have this, and you're like, she is more qualified than anyone we know. So for any job,
there's so much.
That is fantastic.
Organizational crisis management. There's a plethora of things that a caregiver does that in professional settings, not the least of which is keeping your cool when the stuff goes sideways.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Because let me tell you, and here's the thing, and keeping your cool. So let's blow that direction. I can tell you that there were times that I did not keep my cool as much with my husband as it was, because I think professionally I knew I had to be there. Like professionally, I was used to it, and I'm a very directive person. This voice is directive. And so I know what I'm going to ask. And Jason always would worry about me, making the doctors angry. And then he worried that would impact his care. And I'm like, if they're worth their salt, that should never happen. I'm allowed to ask questions. So there's that. But what was any tense moments? Because you and Bob sound like you all are like unicorns and rainbows as much as there can be during this window of time. Get frustrated. What are the emotions and things like that, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. There were plenty of tense moments. I don't mean to make it sound like it was certainly unicorns and rainbows. There were many tense moments. They largely centered around healthcare. There is Bob was a physician, and the doctor that was taking care of him had been a colleague for a long time. Bob, when he was a plastic surgeon, he'd done a lot of breast reconstruction after mastectomy for breast cancer. And so he was very looped into the oncology scene. And he had a similar concern about me that your husband had about you, that because I am a leader in healthcare, I know how it's supposed to work, and I know when it doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. And it was hard to turn that off. We had a disastrous, what I thought was a disaster, or could have been a disastrous experience in a chemotherapy infusion center that, I thought I was going to lose it. And he got very tense about the degree to which I was expressing my frustration with the way things were happening. He did not like me to talk during the doctor visits. Very much, I was there as silent support. And that was frustrating because he'd also, and I think a lot of people, maybe especially men, do this, right? We've had a long night. He's been up all night with a high fever, and everything, everything's kind of disastrous. And the night is just so dark when that happens, right? And then the sun comes up, and this guy gets in the shower and shaves and puts on a tie and a jacket. And we go to the oncologist, and he acts like he just ran a
wrong. That was Jason. Everything's fine. How are you doing, Mr. Handy? I'm good. No, you're not.
Yeah. And you'd sit there and go, who are you? 6 hours ago, you were crying like a baby curled up in the fetal position on the bathroom floor. Like, why can't we talk about that? And the last one of the later visit, and like I said, but it would upset Bob if I, especially in front of this doctor, if I inserted myself in any way, and I did not want to upset him, and I did not want to engage in what I knew was going to be ultimately a silly argument, right? Like,
right.
When all was said and done and he died, I would look back on insisting that I got in the middle of him and his doctor, and I would be furious with myself. I would be, right. So I didn't. I became a much nicer person than I really am. And but there was a moment during I think second to last oncology visit, and when Bob kind of couldn't hide some of the trouble he was having as well. And the oncologist turned to me and said, "You have my number and you can call any time of the day or night." And I said, with all due respect, that's not true, because doctors don't call their doctor in the middle of the night, because they've taken those calls for so long and they're glad to take those calls, but they don't feel, they don't want to bother a colleague. Even as a patient, with a call in the middle of the night. And so I said, that's not true. And he acknowledged, he said, "You're right. I understand what you're saying, but we can't do that." Bob would have been furious with me if I had done that. So that was really not the option. I think there aren't many places in our story where Bob, being a physician, was a disadvantage. That mostly it was an advantage for access. And it is very frustrating to me, again, as a healthcare leader, that there isn't the same kind of access for those who are not in the healthcare field. To some degree for me now, right? Like, I don't have a doctor husband anymore. Like, I'm probably going to have to approach healthcare just like everybody else when the time comes and I need something serious. But but the downside was there was a whole layer for Bob on this professionalism that made it just a little harder on me, not on him so much. The other thing that was ironic about it is, palliative care, which I don't know how much you've spent time on palliative care with your listeners, but of course, no one has to be dying to access palliative care. It is a lot of extra help with serious illness. It's that simple. We did not have palliative care because Bob did not want to be treated by his colleagues, by his partners, and by the trainees, right? The fellows that he had trained. He wanted that privacy. And I can totally understand and respect that. So ours was kind of a DIY palliative care, do it yourself, which of course the disadvantage to that is really on me. The palliative care is one of the few specialties that really recognizes the role of the family caregiver. And even they will admit they don't do it to the degree that it needs to be done, but they are one of the few specialties that recognizes that. And yet, I didn't have any exposure to that kind of support. Occasionally, Bob would come home from work and say, "Jen, you're doing a great job. I saw a patient today and his wife just looked exhausted and I thought of you," and that kind of thing. But that wasn't exactly what was
wasn't every day.
Yeah. I mean, it was nice of him to have a moment of acknowledging that.
Thank you. You're doing a great job, Jen. So I can't believe this. Like, we're over. We're at our time. And I'm like, "Oh, Jen, you're coming back." Yeah. The words of wisdom. And I think because there's so much more to be said is what I'm going to say. There's so much more to be said. And so, Jay, I want to do sister questions, and because I always know mine, but you always have the nuggets. Go for it.
Well, here's my question. So first of all, I want to tell everybody, you have to get this book, and you can find it. I picked mine up after the first conversation with Jen, because it's not a book. It's Jen's heart. I actually kind of tear up on it. I really do, Jen. Like, that's how much this book touched me. And, I'm going to read page 67. I'm not going to cry, I promise. But it says,
okay, if you cry.
Well, that's okay. It says, sometimes I open his closet, lean in, and breathe deeply. I can still smell him. And I've never lost a spouse, but I say that because I still have my dad's, his ball glove. And initially I would smell that glove, but it would make me cry because that was my dad's smell because he played softball. But now I smell that glove and it makes me happy. At what point have you gotten there to where the closet or the flashlights or that you're good with that you've gotten to peace, you've gotten to joy, because grieving's hard.
Yeah, I that's a great question, because when my brother died, I had a lot more of that. I just can't. I can't, whatever it was. I don't want to go to that place where we spent, with Bob, it was a lot less so. And again, I attribute that to so much preparation that we did, so for the most part, I think I no longer, very rarely, I should say, am I doubled over in grief anymore. I miss him. I still miss him every day. One of the things that's kind of difficult about this situation is that I have chosen to, allow my journal to be published and then spend my time talking to people about our story, and in a way that I hope is helping others. And I'm meeting with tremendous success in that regard. As you said, the book won awards. I've got another book that will come out next year. There's a lot. I gave a keynote at a huge meeting about a month ago. Huge, all by all measures, success. And yet I really would just want him back.
Yeah. I'm gonna leave us right there. I'm gonna leave us right there.
Thank you.
And so thank you so much for giving so much of yourself. We're going to have Jen back because there's so much more to be said. And so
he's
much
going to teach us how to age solo. So that's our next topic.
That's
Jen.
exactly what we're going to start talking about is how we ladies, what's life like after, and then how do we age? How do we move forward? And I think, Jen, you're the perfect person to have this conversation with.
Well, I'm hoping to learn something because I feel a little overwhelmed by that myself.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, at least this is the thing. We're all in it together. That's the best part. You don't have to do it alone. And of course, your honorary sisters are right here. So we are always available. Jen. Thank you so much, Jen. And thanks everybody for listening. And until the next time when we confess again. Thanks. Well, friends, that's a wrap on this week's confession. Again, thank you so much for listening. But before you go, please take a moment to leave us a review and tell your friends about the Confessions podcast. Don't forget to visit our website to sign up for our newsletter. You'll also find a video recording of all of our episodes on the Confessions website and our YouTube channel. Don't worry, all the details are included in the show notes below. We'll see you next Tuesday when we come together to confess again. Till then, take care of you. Okay, let's talk disclaimers. You may be surprised to find out, but we are not medical professionals and are not providing any medical advice. If you have any medical questions, we recommend that you talk with a medical professional of your choice. As always, my sisters and I at Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver have taken care in selecting the speakers, but the opinions of our speakers are theirs alone. The views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted and no part can be reproduced without the express written consent of the Sisterhood of Care, LLC. Thank you for listening to the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast.